Welcome back to another episode of the West Seas Guild podcast. I'm your host, Joe, and today my special guest is nobody. That's right, this is the first solo Joe show. This is by popular request from our most avid fans. They want me to do this solo, so that's why I'm here. This episode will be split into two major sections. The first section will be a quick rundown of the games that have taken place between the last time we ran a podcast, which would have been at the end of October. So it's been a while, up through just this past weekend, which would have been January 12th, I believe, was the most recent game. So we're going to do that in the first section. The second section will be some announcements, some updates as far as the West Seas Guild, some rule changes, some updates to what is allowed content, and, just keeping you guys informed as to what's going on and what to look forward to as we start off the new year. And Happy New Year. Okay. So to kick it right into the games that took place, the first game that was run in November was a town full of grung. It's written grunge, and I'm not sure if that's correct, actually. And I have very little information about this game. So basically, the game was run by Nick. He ran the game for Brandon. Looks like was playing Camillo. As well as Feng and Taz. I try to get some information about this game, and these are the notes I got from Taz. I don't recall much other than Taz was a major instigator for violence. However, the most memorable moment for me was the jam session at the end, where we nailed it as a group. That was fun. And then a little smiley face. So I assume that was a fun game. Sounds like it was a good time. And that's it. That's what I have on that game. The next game, which I was a participant in, so I have a little more information about this one, was called A Ruby Gem. A Ruby Gem was run by Steve. This was my first game playing, first game of Steve's that I played in. And so I have a little more information about this one. I do have Taz's information about this one as well, so I'll give that. I'll give it now. He says Taz came along to provide muscle, but was mostly out of his depth, other than smacking around the dire elemental wolves. The most memorable moment was when one of the bushes caught fire, as well as when I learned that Steve is a professional voice actor, and that was very cool. It's fun to have that immersion of having your DM go into using voices. It's something that I've tried to do more recently, and I really appreciate it when other DMs go the extra mile. So, from what I remember from this game, we had gotten instructions to go retrieve this gem that had been stolen or gone missing or something. So we followed it using some sort of compass. We headed towards into a forested area, and we came across three kind of electrified direwolves who we engaged in with the intention of I guess they were fighting over this gem that we could see. So we jumped them. We took out a couple of them, and I believe the third one ran away, and we were able to get this gem. Someone touched it, I think, and was teleported into oblivion. After some hemming and hawing, the rest of us decided to also touch it, and found ourselves teleported into sort of maybe a demi-plane, where there were a variety of mechanical experiments it looked like going on. We fought some constructs, and eventually got into I didn't see a whole lot. I was sort of at the back of the group during this, so due to the lighting setup, I didn't catch a ton of what was going on. But as best I could tell, there was some woman who was running some sort of experiments and trying to, I guess, create robots of some sort. But we fought all of them. We were able to take them out, and I guess which kind of disabled the teleportation from this gem thing. So we were able to exit the way we came, and then delivered the gem to I can't remember the name of the NPC who asked us to go get it. So that was that. The next game was run by Varric. It was called The Race for a Cure. And this was specifically a game run for Caduceus, who had been infected or cursed. I think it was interpreted as a curse. And he was seeking out a way to I think it was vampirism. So he was trying to figure out a way to get cured of that. They found out that there was a witch or a shaman who had some ability to take care of this. And yeah, so the participants in the game were Taz, once again, Caduceus, and Zenri. I don't have a bunch of information about this game either. I know that, like I said, there was a witch or hag or something like that. And a task was requested by her in order to get this vampirism cured. I do have notes from Taz on this one as well. He says, the most memorable thing about this game was an encounter in a graveyard where a child zombie earth elemental spirit thing could drag you down into a grave and let you suffocate, which sounds horrifying. He says, thank goodness it was Taz who got sunk because he has the highest constitution, so he could hold his breath while the others dug him out. The results of this adventure were that Taz, Zenri, and Caduceus were each afforded a boon. Caduceus's boon was simply curing his vampirism, but the deal he had to make forces him to give up his forces the character to give up his body upon whenever his death occurs. The other two characters, Taz, gave up 5 maximum hit points and received proficiency in medicine. Zenri lost 5 maximum hit points and gained proficiency in charisma saving throws. And this was something that I talked to Varric about, along with a couple other DMs, to try to figure out what was an appropriate way to work this out. I don't necessarily love the whole downside for an upside thing, but it made a lot of sense with this particular mission, so I was on board with it. Now we're off to the 2 of the games that I ran, so I have a little more information for these, which will probably end up with them, having a more robust description. The first one was, this is kind of a last-minute game that I threw together on a random Wednesday, I believe. The game was called Claimed. The reason the game was called Claimed was because the premise was that there's a group in the guild called the Claimers, and they were sent out to go find ruins and basically any sort of location that has useful equipment and claim it, and bring it back to the town for to be put to use. The players in this game were Kelkin, Kelly, Leon, Larissa, and Varus. It was designed to be a higher level adventure, and that's what it was. So basically there were two main portions of this. The first one was so the adventure was to go to these discovered ruins of this ancient town. This town that's hundreds, maybe thousands of years old, and has some ruins that, for some reason, people who go to explore seem to not come back. The first encounter was with a trio of what are called basically souped up versions of gorgons. Gorgons being the bulls who have the ability to breathe noxious fumes that turn characters to stone. So the adventurers were mostly able to handle that, although I believe that one of the characters was fully turned to stone. I can't remember who it was, but it was. But then I think it was Kelkin who was turned to stone, and then someone had to use. May have been greater restoration to cure him of that. So it was kind of fun, a moment of tragedy that was overcome by high level healing abilities. After defeating what I called greater Gorgons, the group arrived at the town with the claimers. As they entered the town, they saw these sort of gangly, vaguely humanoid creatures kind of scurrying about, and eventually they engaged in combat with them. And as they did that, they found that there was this massive tree sort of at the center of town that seemed to be maybe coordinating with these gangly creatures, and attempted to defeat the party. I called the tree Old Gastbark, which I believe is a name from Magic. It's the name of a Magic card, I believe. And then Ick-Spitters were the little gangly creatures, which I know for sure is also a creature from Magic. They were able to defeat the adventurers were able to defeat the monsters, and recovered an assortment of treasures, and that was claimed. Just a couple days later, I ran a game called Distillations. Distillations was the game I had hoped to run previously, but I wasn't really ready for it, so I made that other one, and then I ran this game. Distillations is part of a story arc related to a mind flayer, and is specifically sort of designed for the character Glaylin. So Glaylin was in the adventure, as well as Anoa Loss, Morior, Camillo, and Kelly. The beginning of this adventure, they went to visit Gragas and Graves, who are a couple of brewmasters who had been basically the NPCs that granted the mission. They discovered on some barrels of poison, or barrels that had been poisoned, an insignia that referred to a location called Draxa. Draxa is a city of myth that a lot of people thought maybe didn't exist. It's supposed to be this underground sort of central hub for all sorts of trade and diplomacy. Lots of trade, though it's specifically a merchant town. So I went into this without really having a decided direction on how they were going to get there. So I sort of leaned on the players, and it actually worked out really well. So Morior has a criminal contact, I believe. I think his background is as a spy. So he had a contact who he named Sukir, who was an Aarakocra, and she indicated that a contact of hers, known named Emily, but a male orc named Emily, spelled with all sorts of extra consonants, knows how to get into Urdraxa. So they set out with the intention of contacting Emily. Along the way, they came across a red dragon wormling. The red dragon wormling sort of bristled at the arrival of these adventurers and said, "Hey, you better give me some treasure." The Camillo offered a sack of, I think, a pouch of coins. I think they were Electrum coins, and the dragon eagerly accepted them and basically allowed the adventurers to pass and gave them a heads up that that his dad was to the south, a much bigger red dragon, and so they should give a wide berth to avoid running into him because he had a worse attitude than the kid. Yeah, so they were able to do that and avoid an encounter with the dragon, which was prepared. So that's, they did avoid that encounter. That was an encounter that was ready for them to face. And they arrived at Emily's hut. Emily provided direction to a mountain pass, which would allow them to enter this portal that guides them to the city of Urdraxa. And as they're going in, he says, make sure you don't, when you're down there, don't make any deals. When they arrive at Urdraxa, they see it is an underground, a very large underground city. There's an inscription on the stone above the entrances to the city that says, "A deal is a deal." And there are Dao patrolling around. Dao are, for those who don't know, are basically the earth elemental version of genies. They enter the city and are looking for information about poisons. So they end up picking out a potential someone who they suspect might be in the business of poisons, a Duragar named Miles, who directs them to a merchant named Foucade. Foucade was probably the greatest treasure of this adventure. He's got a voice that I really enjoyed doing, and the character just ended up being a lot of fun to role play. The Foucade reported that he had noticed that vast amounts of his poison had gone missing in the past, and he suspected that maybe something untoward had happened to it. Someone had stolen it. He through some magical shenanigans was able to discover that his assistant was actually not his assistant. It was an imposter. After discovering this, the party was able to basically bully the imposter into guiding them to the processing facility where this poison was supposed to be taken after being stolen. The party is able to sort of get the drop on the gang inside by pretending to deliver a shipment of poison, and then engaging in combat. At the beginning of combat, Galen summoned a rhinoceros, or actually I think that happened earlier, and the rhinoceros was used to guide the cart that they had these fake shipments of poison on. So the rhinoceros got involved, started trying to cause trouble. Galen and Camillo were, I believe, the first to jump into the fight, with the rest of them showing up later, as they were kind of split up to manage the outside as well as the inside of this processing facility. After the fight, the party interrogated some surviving Duergar. They learned about a drow woman named Olivia, who seemed to be a lieutenant for T'Chuthla. T'Chuthla being the mind flayer who's causing all this hullabaloo. And they also learned that several Duergar villages seem to have fallen under T'Chuthla's control. So this monster seems to be gaining power in the underground, and that's where the mission left off. So that was distillations. I don't think there were any exceptional treasures or anything from that. It was just a lot of poisons and solvent and that sort of thing. The next mission, the next two missions actually were run by Brandon. And they were related. They were the second to last and last adventures in the Jeweled Sages arc, not multiple arcs. The first mission was a lower level mission for the characters involved were Fume, Morior, Phil, and Zenri. I'm pretty sure it was Phil. Yes, it was. It was the rogue Phil. I'll have to remember this sort of offhand. I don't have notes on these. I remember that there was a dig site where they believed that they had uncovered some banshee or demon that seemed to fly out, and they were concerned that the place might be haunted, and that the diggers did not want to keep working until the place had been secured. We had also heard about someone who had lost their mind, or I'm sorry, about someone who had believed to have poisoned some folks with his potions or perfumes or whatnot, and so we were to investigate that as well. We got to the town. We spoke to the people at the dig site, and we ended up going pretty much straight into these catacombs. We explored. We ended up getting into a tussle with some statues, and I guess there were also zombies in the area that we had to fight with as well. I remember that being a very close fight. It got us right to the brink of oblivion. So that was a fun challenge, although nerve-wracking. We explored further. We discovered some information about this woman who seemed to be associated with the digging that was going on there. And there was some story stuff that was kind of, I don't want to say lost on us, but that we sort of had to piece together from a ways off, because we hadn't been in the previous Jeweled Sages missions. So we were sort of gaining new information without having all of the basis for the previous ones. But it was a fun mission. We ended up discovering that there was, in fact, some creature that had come out of these catacombs, and we also discovered that the big picture things, that these jewels that the Jeweled Sages use, that confer this great deal of information and memories, there was something wrong with them. They had this infestation by some ancient evil, like D&D adventures often have. And so we continued to investigate. We eventually came across this demon banshee floating head sort of thing, think it's called a Vargul, or I think it was a Vargul, and we were able to defeat it, and then we headed home. And that sort of that information about the tainted gems set up the next mission. The next mission was called Salvation of the Sages, and this is a higher level mission. The participants were Kovat, Varos, Draven, Vera, and Malachi. We were requested at the home of the sages, I guess the headquarters, which is near Anyport. We went there and basically got directions to this location in the desert that we could teleport to and try to find this basically these ruins, or this underground sanctuary where we believed that the source of this evil was. We were able to follow the directions and get to that location. We actually encountered a sphinx when we got there, who had tried to beseech us to slay the sages, because they were specifically one sage who had become a lich and had committed some atrocities in order to do that, and among those was to bind this sphinx to the world so she couldn't die. She was stuck in this world as part of his lichdom. It was interesting. I think it would have been useful if I had played in any of the previous ones, because other people were familiar with this character from the previous missions, and I was not. But we went down into this facility, and we discovered that we had I think it was something like 6 hours or so to investigate and to accomplish everything we wanted to before this city would slip back under the sands. I think we had used the onyx gem, the onyx jewel from the jeweled sages to raise this city up from underground. So we summoned the sages, and we started to look around. Our group went in one particular direction, and we found a variety of rooms with varying purposes. We found some medical facilities, a place where it seemed like some experiments had been done with regards to some diseases. We couldn't really tell necessarily if they were trying to cure diseases or trying to create some sort of weaponized disease. But in the end, we found a large, I guess like a tomb. Eventually, we were able to find that there was a secret passageway in that in one of those tombs. We followed that, and basically just throughout this whole area, we were just collecting some information, trying to figure out what was going on. It was, again, a little bit above our heads as far as the complexities of this whole story coming together. But there was I do remember there was a lot of reinforcement of this evil presence that was inside the jeweled sages. That was, again, this woman who was up to no good. Eventually we came back together and went to a central location where the jewels, each of the sages could be used to perform this ceremony that would draw this evil presence out so that we could combat her. Basically, we all got ready for this, a trying fight, a challenging encounter, which was correct. So as this ritual came to a close, our enemy appeared, and at the same time, each of the remaining sages was sort of drawn into their individual portals related to their jewels. There were a couple of cool mechanics here where on your turn you could try to fight the enemy, or you could go into one of these portals. And if you went into one of the portals, you would encounter the person who is associated with that jewel, and basically try to break them out of some sort of nightmare. So one of them had a feeling that all of their efforts were meaningless. Another one felt like they were unworthy of being being one of the sages. Another one felt like anything that they were concerned that all of their efforts would result in the death of innocence. And we basically had to each go into one of these things, and well, we didn't have to, but as part of our adventure, we went into these portals and tried to help the sages break free of this nightmare experience. And so that usually involved a skill check and some role playing, and as we were able to rescue the sages, they were able to join the fight on our side. So we went through a pretty intense, long combat experience, and we were victorious. The evil was extracted from the jewels, or at least as best we could tell, and the enemy was defeated. The big piece of this was that there was a gem, one of the jewels, the onyx jewel, that was unclaimed. There basically is no onyx sage, so that was part of the results of that adventure, was that the offer was made to one of the guild members to become the onyx sage, and we don't really have we haven't resolved that yet as a group of DMs, but I think that's something exciting for us to get into. So that's the culmination of the Jeweled Sages campaign, which is cool. It's always good to be able to finish a storyline. The next adventure was called The Haunted Forge, and this was run by me. So I have some information about this one as well. This was another sort of off the cuff when I had a free evening that I was able to run. It was intended to be very straightforward, and I think that's how it came across. The adventures involved were Camillo, Kelly, Caduceus, Galen, and Zenri. The way the adventure started was that these 5 people were in the guild hall, and a white disc appeared through a portal that just sort of opened up above a table, and this disc fell onto the table. This disc ended up being a communication device from Foucaud, the aforementioned NPC, who I had a lot of fun role-playing again. He invited the group to go on an adventure, and used the disc to teleport them to his establishment. He let them know that, and this is something that sort of I glossed over a little bit, but the idea of that inscription where it says "a deal is a deal" at Urdroxa. There's a belief among people who go to Urdroxa that if you don't honor a deal that is bargained in Urdroxa, that something terrible will happen to you, and that seems to be the consensus, that people hold to that. So they try to honor all of the deals that they engage in while in Urdroxa. So Foucaud shared that he felt he was beholden to this deal that he had made a long time ago, where he told a gnoll named Ricardo that he would be in Urdroxa the next time Ricardo needed another supply of whatever poisons he was providing. So Foucault feels like he can't leave until he knows that either he's completed the follow-up supply or that Ricardo won't ever be coming back. So there was word that some gnolls had gone into a haunted forge. This was a forge that people basically, the people of Urdroxa and the surrounding areas, believe was haunted, and it was an ancient, curse or ghosts or something that are in this forge. So the group went there. They found a massive door, a stone door that was determined to have been created by fire giants, and the door was unlocked. They opened the door and found themselves in this massive forge. There was lava around, basically through the entire area, with smaller islands that had walkways between them in order to go to the various locations inside this forge. It seemed to be unoccupied at first. There seemed to be molten metal in the molds that were in this forge. Galen went up to investigate that molten metal, and the metal seemed to come alive and attack. These elemental flame creatures tried to take out the party. The party was able to defeat them fairly easily, and then one of these creatures disappeared into the lava. The party continued to look around, and eventually was jumped by a pair of demons. The demons leapt out of the lava, since, as most demons are, they were immune to fire damage, and they attacked the party. The party worked together to try and defeat them. Probably the most memorable moment from that fight was Camillo had summoned an earth elemental, and one of the demons grabbed the elemental and basically pushed it into the lava, and eliminating the earth elemental altogether. And then the other one attempted to grab Kelly and do the same thing, but Kelly was able to avoid that attack. The party defeated the two demons as well as the remaining flame elementals that were wisping around, and they did not find any gnolls in the area, but they did find some treasure and were able to get their rewards. Okay, and the last mission we'll talk about is called The Last Laugh. It was run by Varric. And there had been some, if you listen to the last podcast, we had talked some about this grim jester who was a notorious, who had basically defeated an entire party of high-level characters. And so when we saw the name, The Last Laugh, it seemed like it was probably going to be another something related to this jester. The players were myself, Kelly, Malachi, and Azul. This is a pretty straightforward mission. There was a town that had been attacked by a number of undead that seemed to have some sort of logic to it, that they were trying to keep the town from being able to sleep. It seemed like they were, while the attacks were random, they seemed to be intentionally random. And so they summoned the guild for aid. When we got there, we spoke to, I can't remember the guy's name, but someone who some guild members had interacted with before. He directed us to an outpost, basically the front outpost, that would most likely be the first line of defense against these attacks. And the idea was that if we were successful at repelling this attack with with some force that it would prevent future attacks, at least for a little while. We got down there. There were a couple of NPCs who were helping us out, and we set some traps. There were some bear traps that we had set. Kovat had summoned some badgers to create an area of difficult terrain to try to impede the assault of these creatures. And we set ourselves up to try to defend. Eventually the outpost was attacked by a variety of zombies, mostly, and then eventually the Grim Jester of note did show up, riding up atop a sea dragon. And I'm not sure that anyone knows necessarily why he rides this sort of dragon, but it was a tense encounter as the Jester used his most noteworthy ability to incapacitate Malachi with laughter. Kovat was able to banish the Jester as well as the dragon for a few rounds while the group worked to incapacitate the remaining zombies who had been attacking, so that when the Jester and Sea Dragon returned, they were the only enemies that we had to handle. We were able to do so. I mean, it was difficult. There were some things were touch and go for a little while. Malachi had gone down from the laughter, so we had to pick him back up. But when they became unbanished and returned, we were able to take out the dragon, I guess fairly easily. And then the Jester fled. Asul was able to chase down the Jester and take him out. But when we were walking back, and Asul, I believe, was carrying like the Jester's hat or scarf or something, whatever he was carrying, turned into a rat tail. And we realized that the Jester, who has this ability to swap places and appearances with creatures, had swapped places and appearances with a rat. So he had scurried off towards the end of the fight at some point, and we had managed to kill a rat that was running around. But we had defended the outpost successfully and taken out all of the assaulting undead creatures, thereby making the town safe for at least a short period of time. And those are the adventures in that period of time. What I'd like to do now is kind of give ourselves a quick intermission. So sit tight, and we will be back.
Are you experiencing fatigue, chronic pain, or a lack of self-awareness? Do you suffer from occasional outbursts of temper, brashness, or general stupidity? Then Tea and Leaf could be the best pseudo-magical remedy that you're looking for. It's anecdotally proven to help you brave through all your personal issues, physical as well as mental, and give you the courage to face them head on. So pre-order our special Morovin tea today and taste our delectable selection of the finest leaves. Tea and Leaf, coming soon to a port near you. Tea and Leaf is not responsible for any and all side effects that are caused by drinking tea and leaf. Side effects may include headaches, nausea, vomiting, debilitating exhaustion, and even death. Consumer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to part 2 of this episode of the West Seas Guild podcast. This part will be more a variety of bookkeeping information, updates, news, and changes to our system. The first big changes are that we've approved some new content. From Volo's Guide to Monsters, we've approved 4 of the remaining player character races. We've approved Hobgoblin, Goblin, Kobold, and Orc. So this means that Bugbears, Aasimar, and Yuan Ti purebloods are still banned for the time being. We'll continue to look at them. My guess is that someday we may consider unbanning the Aasimar. I do not think that we will ever unban the other two. It's just the Yuan-Ti is a kind of a power situation where they're a very powerful character race, and then with bugbears, I'm not sure that they are necessarily a power problem, but the logistics of trying to figure out how to employ the long-limbed feature. The DMs I've talked to aren't really excited about it, and I don't think that it's something that players feel like they need to have available. There's plenty of different ways to extend your range, in more conventional, fun ways. The next book that we're addressing content from is Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. There are two character races in there. They're the Gith Yankee and the Gith Zeri. Both of them are also approved for use within the West Seas Guild. We've also got a number of new sub-races in two specific races, the Tieflings and the Elves. The Tieflings have a number of basically palette swaps of the standard Tiefling. They give different secondary ability score increases and racial spells. We looked at all these. They all seem okay. None of them seems like it has a particular power issue. So we're going to go ahead and approve all of those as well. And then as far as the Elves, there are three options. There's the Eladrin, the Sea Elf, and the Shadar Kai. All three of those are approved as well. So players have got a lot more versatility as far as what they can do with those player races. The next piece of content that came out, which is an exciting one for me, because I'm a big fan of this environment in Magic, is the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. There are 5 new races: the Centaur, the Loxodon, the Minotaur, the Simic Hybrid, and the Vidalcan. All 5 of those races are also approved. So we've got 5 brand new races to play with. If you decide to play a Centaur, remember that they are vulnerable to ladders. You do have, basically horse legs, so you'll have to take that into account for when you're going up and down ladders. There are also 2 new class archetypes that were released in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. The Circle of Spores Druid is approved, and the Order Domain Cleric is also approved. So we've got a lot of new content that players can choose for their current characters if you decide to rebuild, or for new characters if you have one available, which kind of transitions into our next topic of conversation, which is a revision of the roles of the West Seas Guild. So currently our different roles are basically everyone, and then runners, builders, and elders. Those, you may have noticed in the Discord channel, have been changed to where we now have, again, everyone, and then runners, elders, and world builders. And there are specific criteria that go with each of these. So basically the base level is going to be called just player. And all players, people who fit into only this role, will be able to use one character. You have one character slot, basically, that you can have inside the West Seas Guild. Additionally, if you run a game, you are restricted to magical items from the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's no homebrew items in this at this tier. Now, for those of you who are concerned that this is going to limit your creativity, well, never fear. The next tier up is called Runner. Runners get 2 character slots. Additionally, runners have some flexibility as far as creating your own homebrew magical items. You'll still need to get those items approved by one of the higher ups, either myself or any of the world builders or elders can sign off on a homebrew magical item. And what's important to note here is that is how you become a runner. So anybody who runs one game ever becomes a runner. Additionally, if you already have currently 2 player characters, you are grandfathered in as a runner. So runner is a permanent role. Once you've achieved it, you don't lose it. The next tier up is called Elder. Elder is not a permanent role. It's a role that you can achieve and then be downgraded from, and then re-achieve over the course of your experience in the West Seas Guild. The way that you become an Elder is to run 2 games every 2 months. So basically an average of 1 game a month, but we want to give you some flexibility as far as personal schedules and what you're available for. Just to make sure that you're not that we're not imposing too limited a timeline. We think that running 1 game a month on average is pretty fair, and more importantly, we want to reward people who do provide the environment for our players to play. So if you achieve the level of Elder, you will be provided a 3rd character slot. Now, how does this work if you go up and down? If you achieve your 3rd character slot, you fill it up, you start playing some games, and then for whatever reason, at the next review period, you have not run 2 games in the past 2 months and you get downgraded back to a runner, your lowest level character will become ineligible to play. So once you've dropped, you basically will lock the lowest level character, which presumably is the 3rd character you created. The normal up and down will be determined at on the 1st of every 2nd month. So the February 1st is the first determination. So it'll be whatever players have run 2 games over the course of December and January. And you'll be able to see that distinction on the Discord channel. Different people will have the different roles on their accounts. If you have 3 characters and you drop down to the runner level, if you lose your Elder status, that's something that if you catch up, you can contact me directly and say, hey, I missed running 2 games over the course of January and February. But if you run, 2 games in March to get your average up to 3 games over 3 months, then I'll restore your status and let you be able to use your 3rd character. The idea is to obviously create incentive for people to run games, because that's what makes the community work, is that we have a large number of people running different games at different times. The last role it has been renamed. Previously it was called Elder, but we've repositioned Elder as that advanced game runner. So the new name for this level is called World Builder. World builders don't get any sort of character distinction. So being a world builder doesn't mean that you don't have to worry about running 2 games every 2 months. Even I myself will be limited by that the same rules as far as running 2 games every 2 months in order to be able to have that 3rd character slot. World builders basically are just going to be people who are chosen by me as a sort of advisory council. These are mostly people who have been in the guild for a long time, who have run a lot of games, who have a lot of experience dealing with the different people in the guild. and they're the people who I'm going to go to when determining different sorts of changes to the guild setup. There's not really a specific way to become a world builder other than to run a bunch of games and to be available. If I ask questions in the Elder chat, make sure that you respond, and if I feel like you're a good resource, then I will set up that distinction. So that's it for this episode of the podcast. We, as sort of a preview to future podcasts, it'll basically be like this one. The game recaps will be a little bit more like this one. If I have a guest on the show, they'll obviously go through the same sort of process. But in general, if there's no co-host available, then I'll just recap my games and what information I can grab from the games that I wasn't a part of. And then we'll jump into the further news and notes, any sort of updates to the guild. And also, my goal will be to try to release these around at least once every 2 months to match up with the updates as far as new elders. The hope would be to post podcasts more frequently than that, but the ultimate goal is at least once every 2 months, just to keep people informed. In the next episode, you can look forward to further expansions to some of our downtime options. This is a discussion that is sort of ongoing among elders, and will continue to be so. And we'll sort of get into trying to make sure that different players have lots of options as far as how to develop their characters outside of actual gameplay, since sometimes that's limited. So thanks for listening. I appreciate all of you guys as players and game runners and just buddies. So this is Joe signing off. Have a great month, and I'll talk to you guys soon.